The African Heritage Center. Our website is www.theafricanheritagecenter.org. All right. Feel free to become a member, share our platform with your friends, your families, and support us. Be a part of us. Be a part of what is taking place. The idea behind the African Heritage Center, you will learn a little bit more about that in a little bit. Okay? Our first speaker this afternoon will be Dr. André Kearns. He is an African ancestry and genealogy and diaspora strategist leader. So he has a small presentation for us, and so I ask that you just give him your ear and be ready to get involved in the conversation. Dr. Kearns, good to have you this afternoon. If you want to give us a little bit more about yourself and what you do exactly, and then take it away. Okay.
Happy to do that. First, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. So that's the sound check, and now let me share my screen. Can you see? I'm
going to ask that the volume be raised a little bit for you. Just bear with us. Dr. Kearns, can you try again?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Wonderful. And can you see my presentation?
Yes, we have your presentation.
All right. Well, I'll kick things off then. Listen, happy Juneteenth. It's an honor to be invited by the African Heritage Center to deliver this talk, Ancestry Tracing for People of African Descent. So just a little bit about me. My name's André Kearns, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Black Ancestries, and it's a genealogy services company that helps people of African descent to uncover, to celebrate, and to preserve their powerful family history. So as I was preparing for what I was going to talk about, we had a preparation meeting for this session, and Mr. Ken Jeffers, as part of the discussion, actually issued me a challenge which stayed with me, and that was that he said many people of African descent may not automatically see why tracing your ancestry matters or is of value to you. Some of us identify maybe primarily as Canadian or African American or Jamaican or Trinidadian or Haitian, or simply as Black. And so we may not yet feel compelled to pursue genealogy. It's like, I know who I am, and why do I need to know any more than that and what came before me? And so with that context, I wanted to start this talk by addressing that very question. Why should someone care about tracing their roots? And then once I set that up, then I'm going to shift into a little bit of teaching of how one can do it. So I like to start with my own inspiration for tracing my roots. And that is, and I've been a genealogist now for 20 years. I've been on this journey for 20 years. But my inspiration for tracing my roots started with Alex Haley in Roots. And so I do remember watching the premiere of the Roots miniseries on television as a young child. And so, like millions of people, I was really inspired by it. And so what I didn't know then when I was smaller was that watching that miniseries Roots planted a seed in me that has now blossomed into a full-blown passion, some might say obsession, with tracing my ancestry and also my specific connections to the motherland, to Africa. And so perhaps more importantly, what Roots provided me was a dream that one day I might, like Alex Haley, be able to trace my own ancestry back to a named ancestor born on the continent of Africa. And in Alex Haley's case, that ancestor's name was Kunta Kinte, and he was the protagonist of Roots. So why trace your roots? Here's how I'm thinking about it. Why should a Jamaican, a Canadian, a Trinidadian, a Haitian, or African American care about tracing their roots. So I came up with at least five reasons that I wanted to share with you. First is that we all inherit more than just our DNA from our parents and from our ancestors. We inherit from our ancestors resilience. Hi, sorry, someone is speaking. If you can go on mute, thank you. We inherit resilience. We inherit courage, faith, entrepreneurship, and leadership from our family tree. Family history combats historical erasure. Enslavement in the United States and throughout the Americas attempted to separate us from our history, from our names, from our languages, our families, our places, our contributions. And so genealogy really is empowering and equipping us to go into uncover and to reclaim our own family history and heritage and to share that forward. Knowing our story changes how we see ourselves. So through my company, Black Ancestries, I'm able to share with our clients how they descend from abolitionists, from veterans, educators, entrepreneurs, and landowners. And so those clients can see how those ancestors created a legacy that now extends to them. Tracing your roots gives us an opportunity to reconnect with the broader African diaspora. It connects us to our communities, migrations, other nations, and the global diaspora whose history is shared and intertwined and has been for many, many centuries. And then finally, by tracing our roots, it helps us to understand that we're part of something bigger. It's a legacy that started long before us. It's a legacy, a family legacy that flows through us, and it will continue after us. And so that then the question of why trace your roots now leads to, okay, you made some valid points, perhaps. And so now the question is it even possible for me as a descendant of Africans to, given the history of our people, to trace my roots? And so what I would say is that many people believe that African ancestry cannot be traced because of our history, because of the history of slavery. And so this is what genealogists call the brick wall. When you can go trace back to a certain point, but because of a system like slavery, where we are not documented as citizens or people in the country in which we're living, then there's not much more we can do. But what I would say is, yes, researching our ancestry can be difficult. It is certainly, we're dealing with imperfect information, but is far from impossible to achieve. And so there are records that exist. There's also a record in our very own, etched in our very own DNA that we can tap into to help trace our ancestry. There's valuable oral history that we can gather from our family elders that exists that we should be collecting. There's also community history that we should be gathering and collecting. And so if you gather all of those things, it'll help you uncover more on your ancestors than you might think was possible. And so what also helps is having the expertise to know where to look for information on your ancestors and exactly what to look for in order to trace your ancestry. So when people ask me, how do I get started on my family history journey, I always come back to them with a 4 foundational step approach. And so I share these with pretty much in pretty much every talk that I give because they work no matter where you're starting. And so the first step is to create a family tree and really write it down on pen and paper or buy some family tree software or get online and use a service like Ancestry. Begin with what you know and start to build your way back from there. Step 2, talk with your family. I referenced that before. Talk with family, your parents, your grandparents, family elders. Oral family history is often our richest source as African descended people to tap into the history of earlier generations whose stories perhaps were not written down. Third, extend with traditional historical records research, looking at census records, vital records such as marriage records and death records, church records, court records, and many, many other records that are available to us. And then fourth, I would say discover with DNA testing, which can help you confirm relationships that perhaps weren't documented in the historical record, but they're etched again in our DNA. And so at Black Ancestries, our expertise is especially rooted in this third step, this rigorous historical records research. We do that for our clients. And so this is often where people get stuck because it's not about finding records. It's about knowing which records to look for, where to find them, and how to analyze them in context. And so I want to give you a glimpse into what that expertise looks like in practice. So if you look at the right side of this slide, here's an example from one of our client projects. So in this particular client project, we traced one of our clients back to their third great grandfather, and he was an African American man from North Carolina, and his name changed 5 times over the course of his lifetime. And so in the historical record, you see this in the table, he appears as Daniel McNair in a cohabitation record from 1866, as Daniel McNeese in an 1870 census record, as Daniel Peel in an 1871 marriage record, as Daniel Shelley in 1910 and 1930 in the US Census, and then in the death records of his children, he's listed as not only Daniel Shelley, but Daniel Shirley. And so without really understanding the historical context of emancipation and how our African American formerly enslaved ancestors may have multiple last names until they settled on the one that they were most comfortable with in emancipation. These could easily look like 5 different men, but with careful analysis and an analytical view to this and the experience of working with these emancipation style records, we're able to reconstruct that this is one continuous life and be able to introduce this man to his descendants through our work. So this is the type of work that we do every day, helping our clients move past confusion and ambiguity into clarity and connection with their ancestors. And now I also want to speak up. That was around kind of step 3 in doing that records research and analysis, the importance of that. Now I want to actually move into step 4 and talk a little bit more about that. And that's speaking about the value of DNA testing. So first, what is genealogical DNA testing? Well, in short, it estimates your ethnic admixture, what percentage of your ancestors from hundreds of years ago were originally from the continent of Africa or Europe or indigenous to the Americas, for example. And it also helps you to discover and to verify ancestral relationships and really uncover deeper ancestral roots. And so there are 3 specific types of DNA tests that if you're interested in DNA testing that you could consider taking. The first is called an autosomal DNA test. And so it tests the markers in your found in your 23 DNA chromosomes. And so what you get back from this test are it's an estimate of your ethnic makeup. And so you see a snapshot of my Ancestry DNA results on the left here. And what you can see is it's particularly helpful to help me understand, what percentage of my ancestry came from specific regions in Africa. And these are all modern day regions, but So it's the people who were living in these regions hundreds of years ago. But you see, a quarter of my DNA makeup is sourced from people who were living in the region of Nigeria hundreds of years ago. And then you also see I descend from the people of Mali, Benin and Togo, and Cameroon. So that's a little bit about what you're going to achieve with this autosomal DNA test. Now I want to move to the second flavor of DNA test, and it's called an mtDNA test. And so this helps you to trace your direct maternal ancestry. So your mother's mother, all the way back into your ancient roots. And so men and women can take this test because they're testing the mitochondrial DNA within you, which is passed down from your mother to you. And then the final test type is called Y-DNA testing. And so this allows you to trace your direct paternal ancestry. So your father's 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 father, all the way back to your ancient direct paternal ancestry. And so this DNA test is only available to people who are born as biological males because it is testing and analyzing the markers found in the Y chromosome, which only biological males are born with. So that's a little bit about DNA testing. And so now I want to talk about leveraging those DNA testing results to start to trace your African ancestry. So on the left, you see the estimate of all of the places where my African ancestors came from, according to my Ancestry DNA results, which I shared with you on the previous page. And now, if you go from that and you look on this chart on the right, you are looking at the major African regions contributing to the transatlantic slave trade in the 17th and 18th centuries, according to Dr. Audrey Brown of the U.S. National Park Service. And so when I correlate this map on the left, which is my own genetic makeup, to the one on the right, I'm able to estimate where specifically my ancestors came from, particularly from the slave trading regions of West Central Africa, of Benin, and of the Gold Coast. And so this work of tracing the ancestries of people of African descent through the approach that I just outlined, this is the work that Black Ancestries does every day. And so our mission is to really help people of African descent to uncover, celebrate, and preserve their family history. And then our vision is to be the trusted leader in African diasporic genealogy. And that vision is formed by my own personal story and experience. I'm African American, but my wife is from Haiti. And so we are a blended household. And so our children are both ancestries. And so we aim to be the trusted place for families like ours, who come from anywhere in the diaspora, whether their roots are in Canada or the United States or the Caribbean or South America, and to know that they can come and know that we have the experience and the cultural context and the skill to uncover and unlock our powerful family histories. And so now I want to share a case study of what's possible to be uncovered through the research approach that I just shared previously, that 4-step research. And so I chose this particular case study because I think it powerfully demonstrates something that many people believe is not possible. Tracing one's African descended family across Canada, across the Caribbean, across colonial America, through enslavement, through emancipation, through military service, and all the way through to the U.S. civil rights movement. And so I'm so excited to introduce to you one of my clients. His name is Imani Moody, and we were actually classmates at Morehouse College, which is an all-male, all-Black liberal arts college in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. And so Imani has enjoyed a terrific career since we graduated. He's an accomplished finance leader, and he's also a champion for social justice and equality. And he wanted to know where he got that from. And so specifically, his question to me was, can you uncover the origins and the history of my Moody family across Canada, across the Caribbean, and then the United States. And so I'll give you the answer up front. The answer is yes. And I'll share a little bit with you about what we were able to uncover. So this story will start it in Canada with the Moody's of New Brunswick. And so we were able to trace Imani's direct paternal ancestry back to his great grandfather, a man named Howard Moody, who was born around 1852, and his great grandmother named Ada. And so his great grandfather Howard worked as a hostler, which is basically a man who works with horses, in a place called Woodstock in New Brunswick, Canada. And so Woodstock was the home to a rich and thriving Black Canadian community, and it was strengthened by a migration from York County in anywhere between the 1860s and the 1880s. And so by 1893, this community had supported many things, including establishing an AME church, an African Methodist Episcopal church there in Woodstock. And so Black settlement into Woodstock, into New Brunswick, stemmed from two different migration waves. One wave were a wave of Black loyalists from the United States who, during the American Revolution, sided with the British. And so at the end of the war, the British had lost. They up and moved to Canada around 1784 and beyond. And then the second migration wave was as a result of the War of 1812. There were a number of refugees, Black refugees from that war, who immigrated into Canada around a few years after the war, around 18. And so most Black loyalists from the United States actually settled in Nova Scotia, but there were smaller communities that formed along the St. John River in Woodstock. So that's a little bit of what we were able to uncover on Imani's Canadian history, and ultimately his Moody ancestors would move into the United States, into Maine, and also into New England. The Howell family of St. Croix, roots in the Danish West Indies. We were also able to trace back to Imani's third great grandparents, a man named Sidney Howell, born around 1804, and a woman named Lucy Roberts. And so they were enslaved in St. Croix on Hams Bay Estate. And so you're looking at their marriage record. So St. Croix actually recorded the marriages. This is a church record. They recorded the marriages of enslaved people there. And so they were married on August 8th, 1841 at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Frederickstad in St. Croix. And so Frederickstad was one of the island's two principal towns. The other was Christiansted. Emancipation by resistance. So delayed reform in the Danish West Indies, and then also failed emancipation hopes after Denmark's 1848 March Revolution fueled a lot of unrest in St. Croix. And the unrest was also influenced by the Haitian Revolution starting in 1791 with independence achieved in 1804, and then also Martinique pushed for independence in 1848. So on July 3rd, 1848, there were about 8,000 African descended people who were enslaved in St. Croix who launched an uprising. And it was anchored in Frederickstad, St. Croix. And so the revolt, when they started it, was actually signaled by bells, and then also the calls of conch shells across the west end of the island, including Hams Bay Estate, where Imani's ancestors. And so this resistance movement was led by a man named John Moses Badeau Gottlieb. And so the rebels that he led seized the fort in St. Croix and forced the governor to abolish slavery in that year. And so Imani's ancestors, Sidney and Lucy Howe, who were then in their 40s, were among those who freed themselves, along with their daughter, Cordelia, who was born 12 days after St. Croix's emancipation. She would eventually immigrate to the United States and to Maine. And then now let's move to the United States. My Negro servant named Peter. So Imani's sixth great-grandfather was a man named Peter Freeman. And as I just referenced, he was described as my Negro servant named Peter when Captain Thomas Stansfield bequeathed him to his wife, Hannah, in Ipswich, Essex County, Massachusetts, in a will dated the 10th of January, 1739. And so you are looking at that will document. And so what I'll say is that most Black people cannot trace back to their sixth great-grandparent. And so we were ecstatic to be able to do this and introduce Imani to his sixth great-grandfather, and then also give him an opportunity to see his sixth great-grandfather documented in records as an enslaved person. And I've done a lot of this type of research, and it's difficult. I go through the same cycle of emotion every time I see one of my ancestors or one of my clients' ancestors documented as property in the historical record. It's a feeling of a cycle of anger feelings, and then sadness. And I have to give myself the space and time to process what I'm looking at. But over time, that anger and that sadness ultimately grows into inspiration, that I am inspired that my ancestors or the ancestors of my clients had the strength and the agency to endure what they did, to build a legacy that now extends to me, to us, the diaspora. And I'm proud to be part of that legacy. A Black patriot, John Freeman. And so Freeman's son, John Freeman, who is my client Imani's fifth great-grandfather, actually served in the American Revolutionary War. So on the 11th of August in 1832, while he was living in Maine, he applied for a Revolutionary War pension. And so that pension document application is why we know that he served in the Revolutionary War. And so John Freeman testified that he first enlisted in the Ipswich, Massachusetts militia. They marched to Rhode Island under Captain Prince, where he and his fellow troops guarded the coast. And then they later served in Providence, Rhode Island under his until his 6-month term ended. Then he re-enlisted under Captain Dodge. They marched to Prospect Hill, where he guarded prisoners from Bergen's army until his 3-month discharge. So, and then Peter Freeman actually testified it on his own behalf, and that strengthens the family's documented connection. And so where does all of this lead to about helping Imani learn more about who he is and the freedom of the struggle that's inherited in his blood, his passion for freedom fighting and justice and equality? Well, I can look at it this way. On the one hand, on the left here, in 1777, we know that Imani's fifth great-grandfather, the Black patriot John Freeman, risked his life fighting for America's independence for the purpose of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Fast forward 184 years later, John Freeman's fourth great-grandson, Imani's father, John P. Moody Jr., risked his very own life as a freedom rider in the segregated South, demanding that America finally live up to that promise that traced all the way back to John Freeman of liberty and equality for all. And so at this point, when I share these stories with people, they say, that's pretty amazing. But I also want to know, can we trace back to our ancestry back to Africa. And so the honest answer is that's very hard, but sometimes it can be achieved. And so here's what I'll summarize what we know based on what I just shared. There are records available to help us trace our ancestry, but records often hit limits. DNA can help. You see me tracing back through DNA to my regions of ancestral origins across the continent of Africa. So sometimes that helps. Occasionally you'll have documented evidence that survives, but rarely do all of these elements survive in a way that allows you to connect the dots to trace back to a named African ancestor. But when those dots do connect, something extraordinary happens. And so let me share one example, a dream fulfilled. I think I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that after seeing Alex Haley's Roots on TV, it left me with a dream that one day I might be able to trace back and call the names of.
Dr. Kearns, can you hear me? Can anyone online hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Dr. McClurkin. We seem to lose Dr. Kearns. Okay, in the meantime, while we work out the technicalities with Dr. Kearns, can we perhaps engage a little bit in about what we've heard so far? How is everyone feeling about what they've heard about the presentation in regards to tracing your own DNA and ancestry and the importance of it? Would anyone like to engage with that? I have someone in the audience. Okay. Oh, perhaps, yes. Well, are you able to swing your camera for me? Okay, great. Who would like to ask something or comment? Come on up. Don't be shy. Come on, baby. Come on. You have to come to the microphone so that we can all see and hear you. Wonderful. This is our lovely BB. All right. You have a question?
Well, it's just a comment I have. The African diaspora is large, and it cuts across continents. And I think having a session like this to speak about how these connections can actually grow us in ways we have not yet imagined is very, very important. Something I got from the presentation was like, well, everybody can say, well, I'm already Jamaican. I have an identity. I'm Black American. I have an identity already. But why the need to trace the roots right back to the beginning, to the history? Why the need for that connection? And it got me really thinking deep. We've been scattered, but we can come back. And I think it's a decision we take, that ownership of knowing who you are and reconnecting. I think it will do something very great, like to your spirit, because I know how I was already feeling on that seat, and just imagining all the seeds, from everywhere unifying, and the force, the strength, the connections that's going to be able to create, with everyone bringing their own unique identity from across all the different areas that we've been to, and bringing it together to form this formidable force. So I look forward and I encourage everyone. I think this is amazing, an amazing thing to do. And yes, thank you, Dr. Kearns.
I'm so sorry about that.
All right. Thank you so much, BB. Dr. Kearns, glad you are back. We just had an audience member, making comment about what you've presented so far. We're very much enthused. So please do continue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, actually, I'll say that was planned on purpose to build the suspense. Just kidding. So I think I was talking about a dream fulfilled, that through my research over the course of 20 years, I was able to realize my dream and trace back my own family back to named ancestors born on the continent of Africa. And so I want to share a little bit about that. So here's a summary of what I learned about my Kumbo family through that 20-year research journey. So my Kumbo ancestors were among the very first Africans arriving in Virginia in the United States prior to 1630. And so they, as I said, they arrived to Virginia from the Kingdom of Ndongo, which is in modern day Angola. And the name Kumbo is a unique sounding name, and it has origins in Africa. And so my first generation Kumbo ancestor was born in Virginia, and he became free. And so you're looking at a photo of me standing at the memorial marker for the place where my ancestors arrived in Virginia. Then it was called Port Comfort. Now it's called Fort Monroe. And this is in a place called Hampton, Virginia. And so I, through this research, have been able to document this family across 4 centuries from my original African ancestors extending to me. And so, and I've identified thousands of Kumbo descendants, and all of us share a connection through an original set of African ancestors. So our Kumbo family origins start with a man named Emmanuel and a woman named Joan of Ndongo, as I referenced. And so they are my 11th great grandparents. And so they arrived from Africa to Point Comfort, Virginia on slave ships sometime between 1619 and 1628. And so from Port Comfort, they were bound to landowners in a place called James City County, Virginia. And so I've done extensive research on the land patents in James City County, and I've been able to locate both Emmanuel and Joan there, and they're tied to a landowner named William Davis. Emmanuel Kumbo, Negro. So Emmanuel Kumbo, my 10th great-grandfather, was born around 1634 to Emmanuel the Elder and Joan in James City County. And so in 1644, the Virginia legislature ruled him no slave, but an indentured servant. And he was ordered to serve 21 years as an indentured servant, and then he could be free. So by September of 1665, he's freed after 21 years of bondage. And from this point forward, he and his descendants lived as free Black people in America. And so on the 18th of April, 1667, 2 years after achieving his freedom, he takes ownership of 50 acres of land in James City County, Virginia, where his mother and father had labored. And you are looking at the 1667 land grant that confirms 50 acres to my ancestor, Emmanuel Kumbo, Negro. Kumbo family reunion. So here's a photo from our Kumbo family reunion about 10 years ago, which I helped to organize. And I will just tell you, it was absolutely amazing to have the opportunity to meet so many of my Kumbo family members, which I'd connected with through my genealogy research, through my DNA test matches. And so we hosted this family reunion in a place called Williamsburg, Virginia, which is just a few miles from James City County, where our ancestor, our original ancestor, Emmanuel Kumbo, was one of the very few African American landowners in all of Virginia at that time. And so as I start to close this talk and we move into the panel, I want to talk about a global movement we're living in. It's really a global reconnection movement, a reconnection for us as the diaspora to our African roots. And so there's, here are the dots that I see that are connecting. There's growing interest in ancestry tracing. Many people across the African diaspora are now using genealogy, DNA testing, oral history, archival research, all these strategies that I shared with you all to better understand where they come from. Some people are like me and they want to They want to do the research themselves. They want to gather the ingredients and cook the meal. But many others just want to know their family history, and so they hire companies like mine. They say, I don't want to gather the ingredients and cook the meal. I just want to sit down at the table and enjoy the meal. And so that's what we're able to provide them. So there's that growing interest in ancestry tracing. There's also growing interest in reconnecting with Africa. I guess it's a growing interest. It's always been there, tracing all the way back to Alex Haley and roots and before that. But beyond discovering our origins, we have this hunger, and we're seeking cultural, educational, and personal connections, deeper connections to the continent and to our ancestry ties to the continent. Ghana's Year of Return. So Ghana has really done an incredible job, I think, defining a model and sparking a global conversation around reconnection, belonging, homecoming, really embracing the diaspora and encouraging them to come to Ghana. And then that leads me to my next point, citizenship and right of return initiatives. And so I'm presuming these are many of the themes that we'll cover in the panel, but we see countries like Ghana and also Benin creating these pathways for children of the diaspora to return to Africa and to reclaim formal ties to their ancestral homelands. Heritage tourism. Travel continues to increase. Heritage travel, hundreds of millions of dollars in heritage travel, and it gives the diaspora a way to experience history, visit ancestral places, and really deepen their cultural understanding. And then finally, diaspora engagement and investment. So reconnection is not just about reconnecting with our past and where our ancestors came from. It's setting the table to create the opportunity to build future relationships, institutions, businesses, and creating cultural exchange across our powerful diaspora. So why does all this matter? I would boil it down to this. Every family possesses a powerful and inspirational family history and powerful and inspirational family stories that we can tap into. There's stories of resilience. There's stories of sacrifice. There's stories of deep love and of family. There's stories of achievement despite facing significant challenge. And there are stories that deserve to be remembered. Our ancestors deserve to be remembered. And we have the opportunity to uncover their stories, share them forward so that they are part of our collective memory moving forward. And so as I close things out, I want to close with a call to action, 3 calls to action. One is make it a task to ask one elder in your family a question about your family's history this month. That's number 1. Number 2, take steps to build your family tree. Again, you can start by just writing it down on using a pen and paper, or you can sign up for Ancestry.com or use software, but start to build a family tree. And then the third step would be just take the first step. I've shared a lot with you, and this is a lot that I've accomplished over many years, but the only way I was able to accomplish it was to take one step at a time. And so don't think about all that you want to accomplish. Just think about the first step you're going to take to learn a little bit more about your family history, and the rest will follow. And so with that, I want to say thank you. And here's my information. And again, it's been an honor to share these thoughts with you. And I look forward to flowing into the next part of this program and into the panel discussion.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kearns. That was beautiful.